Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. We're gonna look at Nio's earnings and we can see that the market reacted very well. We are up over 4% in the pre-hours and I think the numbers are looking decent. So you can see there the actuals are on the left there in the column where I wrote an actuals, and the Q2 2024 yellow one is the one that I expected. So we can see that the revenue was around 100 million less than my expectations. So that's not a big issue. They slightly beat the revenue based on the guidance that they gave on Q1. But to be honest, that was expected ever since we knew that the delivery numbers was also a bit higher than the Q1 guidance. In Q1, I think they guided for around 54 to 56 and they came in, as you can see, at 57 and 300. So a bit less of revenue there, but slightly higher than the guidance. Vehicle sales is also slightly less, so this affects the average selling price. You can see that since we have the vehicle sales, we know the number of cars sold, so the average selling price should be around 37,600. To be honest, I kind of increased my average selling price based on a few discussions I had. Those honestly made sense, but yeah, seems that I shouldn't have changed that. But still, vehicle sales at a healthy 2.15 billion US dollar. Other sales, that's where I'm really happy. I know that most people don't care about this, but again, 243 in other sales, that's really important. We can see that it's a sequential increase from 212, an all-time high in other sales. So we can see that the other sales in the second quarter were at 243 million, representing 11.3% from increase from second quarter and 15.6% from the first quarter of 2024. Also, we can see that this is according to them, it depends essentially on more purchase of parts, accessories and after sales vehicle service. And I think that these kind of lines here is kind of important because as the fleet size increases, we can see that the fleet size at the beginning of Q2 was 537,000 cars. Right now it's another 40,000 there, so it's like 577, just below 580,000. So as the fleet size increases, we should see also, the other sales kind of keep up with that very nice, in addition to all the other sales like lifestyle stuff that they have in their Nio houses. So I'm very happy with this because we are essentially at a run rate of 1 billion US dollar in other sales. So very happy with that. Cost of sales lower than I expected, and this is good. This is really interesting because it kind of points to the picture that we have always talked about, that the lithium carbonate price has been going down and is kind of continuing to go down. So I think in addition to that, we have the increased volumes. Nio is steadily now at 21,000 cars per month. So we should say the numbers come into play and help, with the bigger number of production. And we can see that the gross profit was roughly in the same ballpark, 232. I expected 283. Now this I kind of hoped for 11.30 gross margin, but we kind of got 9.7. Still good, This is almost a doubling of last quarter, and better than any quarter other than until Q3 of 2022. We obviously know there was huge different market orientation at that time. We can see that the vehicle margin is healthy, 12.2, and if you just quickly compare those two margins, so XPeng's gross margin is at 14%. Comparing to Nio's, it's a bit higher. We can see that XPeng at 14 is 4 points higher than Nio, whereas vehicle margin for XPeng is a bit lower, actually substantially lower. And this is explained by the fact that for XPeng, when they sell a car, so you can see they sell a car at 6.4 margin, and then somehow they get a gross margin of 14% on the whole business. Well, it's depending on the the other sales that they have. Whereas for Nio, it's kind of the same thing, but the problem with Nio is, their gross margin is for the whole unit is less than the vehicle margin. And it's purely based on the battery swap stations, I think. It's too capital intensive, which is one of my critical points of Nio, that they should stop expanding, in my opinion, the swap station at insane rates. They kind of have started already slowing down, but then they mentioned a few weeks back that they're planning to expand it to capability of 1,000 new stations per year. I think that's too much at this stage. But yeah, I think if you look at the average swaps per station, which you can see on this column here, we are poised to be at around 35 maybe by end of the year, which is a little bit more than the half of 60 required, which is the break even according to the CEO. Sure, we do have other income streams for the swap stations. I know that recently they opened the opportunity to use those as kind of energy storage and grid balancing in China and also in Europe. So there's other revenue streams coming in from the swap station for sure. But still, I think, I wouldn't like the company to add swap stations at a high pace right now. But we can see that there is a reason why Nio's gross margin is lower than Xpeng, for example. But no matter what, it's going in the right direction. And then looking at the research and development, not insanely higher, but it's still 10% and more than I would have wanted. And I think, yeah, it's okay. It's not the worst. We are not back in the 560s or those kind of numbers. It's okay. Hopefully they don't, increase this by another 30 million by next quarter. So hopefully they stay around here or slightly lower it. And SG&A, I kind of expected them to increase this quite a bit. I think it's, compared to the previous quarter, we can see that they almost doubled their sales. And they say that in the earnings report as well, that one of the reasons why their cost went up in the SG&A is due to the increased sales personnel and the increased cost that comes with, trying to sell more cars. So yeah, I think this is on this line here, SG&A administrative. They say that the increase in selling, general and administrative expenses over the second quarter was of 2023 and first quarter of 2024 was mainly due to the increase in personnel costs related to sales functions. So that makes obviously a lot of sense. And this is the reason why I think if we come in at, let's say, Q3 of 63,000, I do not necessarily expect SG&A to increase. You can see that my estimations for Q2 before this earnings actuals was the same, and also for Q3 roughly. Now I will update it a bit, maybe put them on the 570 again for Q3, but we will look at that later. Let's focus on Q2. We can see that also the interesting part here for me, loss from operation. 100 million more than expected. It's less than Q1 for sure. But the worrying sign for me here is though that despite, almost close to a doubling of revenue and close to a doubling of sales, we only really managed to decrease the loss from operation from 747 million to 717. So it's 30 million. So almost like, let's say, what could that be? 5% reduction. So by doubling the sales, almost 80% increase in revenue, you reduce the loss from operation by a meager 5%. So this was, I'm not too happy about it, to be honest. I think it's a shame that, but it's how it is. But still, despite all of this, I think we are going in the right direction, because if you play with the numbers, let's say if we have a Q4 of 2025 and we have, not necessarily increased the research and development expenses by a whole lot. You can see here 480, hopefully for Q4 of 2025. SG&A obviously should increase. Maybe we can even increase it to 700 if they are doing, So let's do that. We can see that the loss from operations and net loss goes down substantially. And we know that we have 5.7 billion left. So if we do this train of thought, so if we take that number 5.7 and if we remove, let's say we remove another, if the actuals of Q3 came in, let's meet in the middle, I'll say 500 million. So let's do that. Or actually I think 500 it's a bit too low, so let's go 580. 580 would be better, since we know that the loss from operation was 716 now. So we would have around 5 billion left in Q3 of 2024. Let's do this again. I know it's a bit slow, but I think it's very important to think about this. So then we would have this, and then we would, let's say, loss from operation. My expectations is 415, 335, but heck, let's do another 5. Let's do 520. Let's do 520. So by Q4 of this year, we are at 4.6 billion. So we should definitely have enough money in the bank for 2025 as well, because if you go in 2025 from January 1st with 4.6 billion on hand, almost $5 billion US, and by that time I think the loss per quarter should be less than 500 million per quarter. So if you, let's say, even assume the worst case scenario of 500 million loss per quarter in 2025, that's another 2 billion gone. So then you would have, by end of 2025, you would have something like 2,600,000,000 left. But then at that time, my expectations is that net loss would be closer to a quarter of a billion. So yeah, but also, you know, these are depending on nice margins. You know, margins should go from 9.7 that are now to 16. It's possible, not impossible, but so that's I think that's the situation with Nio. So let's have a quick look again at the. So it was at 4.9%, now it's around 4%. So let's see how it reacts. Obviously the stock has been taking a beating. Over year to date we are down 53%. Hopefully this helps to give a bit of confidence to the market. But if I have to be completely honest, I think this slows down the rate of, you know, suspicions from the critics of Nio, for sure. This was a good quarter, there's no argue about that. But the problem for me is, you know, I mentioned all these past 3 months since Q1, they need to find a way to slow down the loss from operation. As I showed you here, there shouldn't be any worry. We should be almost at 3 billion cash on hand by Q4 of next year. Let's say 2.5 billion. So there's not necessarily a risk of dilution at this current stage, at least before, let's say, the second half or at least early, let's say late 2025 or early 2026, because if they see a need of increase of more cash for, you know, expanding the capital expenditure for multiple different more car variants and Firefly, you know, the third sub brand for Nio, that would obviously need quite a bit of money. But other than that, I think it's fine. But again, loss from operation, I'm sorry to say, like they need to do something about this. Like, we cannot sustain, like why do they need, and I'm sure they need, it's very realistic that they should increase the SG&A from the previous quarter, for sure. I mean, they doubled the sales in number of cars, no doubt about it. But how is it possible that Tesla, let's actually have a look at Tesla. So Tesla is selling 1.8 million, right? So we can see that Tesla's SG&A on the last quarter was 1.27 billion. So how is it possible that Nio, that is poised to sell around, you know, poised to sell around 60 to 65,000 cars in Q3, is going to have around $500 million or 550 million US dollar in SG&A, and Tesla, that is poised to sell, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000 cars, is doing just over 2 times. So that's where I start to criticize Nio management a bit. I think there's room to cut the cost on SG&A. I think this should be more efficient, because they could easily halve this cost and still not do as much as Tesla does per single car sold. And if you remove, let's say, 200 million from this, then the loss from operation would already go from, you know, 700 million to 500 million at this current stage. That's I'm much more comfortable with. So yeah, I think there's room for improvement here. But anyways, that's gonna do it for today. Please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.